Welcome to the Register's Report. My name is John Buckley. I'm the Register of Deeds of Plymouth County. This show is about Plymouth County real estate. We'll be talking about the June recordings at the Registry of Deeds. The headline for the month was Mortgage Numbers Highest in 10 Years. We're going to talk a little bit about the numbers all across the board for the registry. In the second segment of the show, I have a couple great appraisers coming on as guest appraisers, are a very important part of the real estate process. And then we're going to go in the third segment to some of our Plymouth County and Plymouth Colony history. So let's get right to the numbers. Sales across Plymouth County continued. They were down slightly over last year. There were 836 deeds recorded in June, more than the 647 in May. However, 24% less than last year, and we're down 12% for the first 6 months in 2020. We're going to bring up an image of all the sales across Plymouth County. Sales from Abington to Whitman. Every community had sales, and you can see that listed from January through June. The biggest story of the month of June was mortgages. As I mentioned earlier in the show, we had the highest number of mortgages recorded in 10 years. The rates are incredibly low. There were 3,043 mortgages recorded in June, up from 27 in May, up 48% compared to last June. And for the first 6 months of 2020, they're up 57%. Again, a lot of people are taking advantage of historically low interest rates. I was talking to a mortgage broker this morning, and you can get rates in the below 3 for a shorter term than you're probably doing now. And if you haven't done that, I strongly advise you to take advantage of our current situation. Now, the foreclosure situation is absolutely the reverse. Because we are in a foreclosure moratorium, both foreclosure deeds and foreclosure notices have dropped off the shelf. There were only 5 foreclosure deeds in all of Plymouth County in June. A foreclosure deed is when a lender takes back property from someone, usually for failure to pay. And so that is 83% lower than last June. The other foreclosure document we received, the first one to notify us and the owner that they are in trouble, is a foreclosure notice. There was 0 foreclosure notices recorded in Plymouth County for June because of the foreclosure moratorium. It was 100% less than the 97 foreclosure notices last June, and down 45% for the first 6 months of calendar year 2020. You're also going to see a listing of foreclosures and orders of notice for our 27 communities, and there are a lot of zeros there, which tell you what is happening at this current time. If you are in trouble and you haven't reached out to a housing counselor to try to put your overdue payments on the back end of your loan, which is allowed for most people, I advise you to do that as soon as possible, because the foreclosure moratorium currently is coming to an end in the middle of August. So electronic recording has been a huge benefit to the registry with the shutdown, the ability to record documents over the internet, 83% of which have come through for recorded land, in the high 50s for land court, have really made our job much more functionable. and a lot better for the people that are trying to record documents. A training room has been closed to the public and remains so until further notice. But watch for property scams on your property. Times like this are when people try to take advantage of people. If you see anything funny come into you relative to your real estate property, be very, very careful about doing anything in response to that. For many people and for most people, real estate is your most valuable asset, and you have to be very vigilant to make sure that nobody's taking advantage of you. My guests in the next segment, as I mentioned earlier, are a couple of appraisers. Gary Minahan of Affiliated Appraisals and Sean Fitzgerald will be joining me on this show to talk about the current status of appraisers and the role that they provide in getting people allowed for funding and to purchase their homes. So we'll see in the next segment. In this segment of the show, we always do something educational. We've had realtors, title examiners, commercial brokers, builders, home inspectors, and I have had for a number of years a couple of great appraisers. Appraisers play a very important role in the home buying process because they are the ones that make sure that the banks can lend you the money you're looking for. So I'll start off with Gary Minahan. Gary, can you introduce yourself and your company and tell us a little bit about how you got into the appraisal business?
Okay, sure, John. I started off as a real estate broker, real estate salesperson, and then I just started doing appraisals kind of on the side to make an extra buck when the real estate market had slowed down. And after a while, I kind of was trying to do both, and it didn't work out. So I kind of slipped over into the appraisal field. I still do hold a real estate broker's license. The majority of the work that I do is appraising.
Great. Sean, why don't you share the same information with our viewers, please?
Sure. I'm Sean Fitzgerald. My business is Fitzgerald Appraisals, located in Brockton, Mass. I actually started out as a computer programmer and then a systems analyst, and then I sold computer software pretty much before anyone knew what it was. After 1 million frequent flyer miles in 4.5 years, I said, stop traveling. And I always had an interest in real estate. So I tried brokerage, and that's a very, very difficult job. I was a good salesperson, but big time constraints selling real estate. Coming from that analytical background, it made it easy to transition into appraisals. And in the early 90s, they started a requirement for licensing. And that was about the time when I was thinking about getting into appraisals, and the timing was perfect. Fortunately, I was paying the bills by designing a system for the Warren Group, Banker and Tradesman. They publish every week the information that comes from the Registry of Deeds, and it gets matched up with the assessor's records. And you'll see that published in your local newspapers, or you can buy a subscription to their data. That's how I got into it, and I enjoy it.
So why don't we start with you, Sean? Why don't you explain for the viewers what the role of an appraiser is in the real estate market?
The role of the appraiser is to provide an unbiased opinion of value. And the term appraisal literally means opinion of value. The most important part of it is that we be unbiased. We shouldn't favor a buyer or a seller. And in many cases, what we're trying to do is to protect the interests of most frequently the lender, the bank that's going to lend the money. So if there's a $300,000 house and we say it's worth $400,000, now they're going to lend over $300,000 on it, and they have bought the house. And if anything goes wrong with the payment schedule, then the bank owns it, and we have not done our job protecting them.
Right. Gary, let's talk a little bit about the training that you, as an appraiser, goes through, CEUs, and all the things you do to keep up your standards.
Yes, training is very important, and it Sean alluded a little bit to things that had gone on in the past, and the importance of having a good appraisal to support a value. But when we first started off, myself anyways, I was like I say, a real estate broker, and there was no licensing for appraisers. The company that I worked for, they had firemen doing appraisals. They had whoever they could, get to do appraisals. And as a result of that, there were problems. People didn't really know what they were doing. And, a couple issues. The banks were getting into some problems as a result of the bad appraisals. And the licensing, like I said, Sean, went into effect, cleared up a lot of the problems because the appraisers now had some standards that they had to follow and guidelines in order to put an appraisal together.
So how many CEUs, continuing education units, do you need a year?
We're required to take, what is it? You're going to, that one, Sean, the number
14 a year.
Yeah, per year. And also you have to take your USPAP course, which is required by all appraisers to do by the standards. And that is what is really the guideline that we all have to work under. And it's coming into effect quite a bit now with this COVID situation, because a majority of the banks are requiring that we do full inspections of the properties to be sure that they get in a good appraisal. And a lot of appraisers have issues of, initially. Now it's not as intense as it was. The process is a little bit easier. Most people understand. I did an appraisal yesterday. The woman made sure all her kids are out of the house. She was there to let me in the door, then she disappeared. More people are still concerned about it, but it's kind of mellowed out a little bit. It's initially people just were saying, no, I'm not going in the house, and the homeowners were saying, no, you're not coming in my house. So it made it difficult for us for a couple of months.
Sure, I can imagine. So, Sean, let's talk about how, what is the first step, who you get notified by before you start your work, and how you go about a appraisal assignment.
First step, of course, is to get an order from the client, and the definition of who the client is important. As I said, most appraisal work is done for lenders. I happen to do a lot for attorneys and accountants, and things that might get into legal battles. But the first thing we do is online look up the Registry of Deeds to find what the property is, where it is, who owns it, when it was purchased, what was paid for it, whether it was 2 weeks ago or 2 centuries ago. And typically the next thing we'll do is look up, again, usually online, what's called property record card from the town assessor. And that documents the details of the land and the buildings that are on the land. So we have an idea what we're going to be appraising when we set up the appointment. The next step is to visit the property and document everything that we see, make sure it matches up with those documents that I already identified, and make sure that we know what it is that we're appraising. And as an example, sometimes we'll get to a property and it'll be surrounded by land, and the deed says it's only 1 acre of land, and we find out that someone actually wants us to appraise 10 acres plus the 1 acre. And so, I mean, that makes for an interesting assignment, but again, it's a matter of knowing what it is you're supposed to appraise. After we've done our inspection, we typically go out and look for what are called comparables. And a comparable is a property that has recently sold and can be used to compare it to the property that's being appraised, which we call the subject property. Let's say there are 2 identical houses. One of them has a 2-car garage and the other one doesn't. Well, we'll make an adjustment for that 2-car garage. And with a series of additions and subtractions, we should come to a value for the subject property. Typically, we'll use at least 3 of these comparables so that we don't find the value skewed by just one very high or very low priced property. And then we write up the report, communicate it to the client.
Great. Anything you want to add to that, Gary?
No, I think Sean did a nice explanation of how we go about doing an appraisal and the importance of comps. A lot of the banks require not only 3 sales, they're also sometimes looking for an active listing or 2 to just show, what direction the market might be going in now. The active listing may be listed $1,000 more, whereas one of your comps, which was 6 months ago, was 10,000 less. So you can kind of derive an adjustment there that the market is improving or values are increasing.
So once you've submitted your report, how often do you get a challenge to the value? Gary, start with you.
It's a very rare. I've been doing it for 30 years or so. So I'm pretty much, cover my bases and make sure that if I'm going to put a value on a house, I'm going to have it well supported. I don't know if Sean would be. I'm sure Sean would be in the same boat.
Yeah, Sean, we've had these conversations over the years, particularly during the last housing crisis, when a lot of the problems were coming from appraisers that were, really overstating the values.
Yes, there was a lot of that, and we might see it soon again. Sometimes it's clearly the fault of the appraiser. Sometimes it's really tough to read the market properly, especially when it's about to turn.
Right.
And those comparables that I spoke of are all transactions that have occurred in the past, whether it was earlier today or earlier in the year. So we're on a roller coaster ride looking backwards, and we don't know we're on our way down until we feel the wind at our back and see how far we've fallen. And we don't know when we're at the bottom until we see that we're on our way back up. Like I say, sometimes it is the fault of the appraiser. Sometimes it's the fault of organizations that step in between the appraiser and the lender. I don't want to cast aspersions on the entire profession called appraisal management companies. Their job is to manage all the paperwork for the lenders, but sometimes they'll push an appraiser to get a higher value in a rising market or a lower value in a falling market.
Yeah, I remember having this conversation because both of you have been guests a number of times over the years when during the 2007, 8, 9 foreclosure crisis, when all of a sudden values dropped significantly. We're kind of on a run right now, as you said, with recordings and higher values for a number of years now. But I'm very concerned about what will happen once the foreclosure moratorium comes to an end, which is currently scheduled for sometime in August. Whether or not there have been a lot of people that haven't been able to pay their mortgage and been relying upon the moratorium to keep the banks off their backs. Well, to see.
I think that the COVID thing is definitely going to have some sort of factor.
Right.
People can only hang on for so long, especially if they don't have a lot of equity in the property.
There's been a number of people that, because of a state law, have been able to put their payments on the back end of their loan. And I think that certainly will help them. I'm not sure the percentage of people that have done that are in trouble. We'll be seeing that probably in the September numbers because it wouldn't really start to show until end of August. And this month, for example, our numbers for the month of June, the month we're reporting on today, there was 0 foreclosure notices for the whole of Plymouth County.
Wow.
No foreclosure initiatives filed for any of the 27 communities in Plymouth County. And we know when the foreclosure moratorium ends, that'll change.
Yes.
I've never heard of that before, yeah.
Yeah, it's difficult to predict the market based on this COVID experience because it's not very close to anything that anyone has experienced who's not under 120 years old. You hear a lot of talk about people saying they don't want to live in Boston anymore. They don't want to commute to Boston anymore. And as a consequence of that, we might see a surge in Plymouth County, Bristol County, Norfolk County, all the counties really that are outside Boston and where people do a lot of commuting because they don't even want to spend time in a bus or a train. But that can't last forever, especially if you don't have a job or an income. And that's really where it comes down to. Can you afford the property?
Yeah, and clearly we're hearing that a lot more people are looking for homes with a home office when they don't have to go into the office space in a city like Boston. And that'll change the complexion of the real estate market to a degree.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. So could you share your contact information for our viewers, starting with you, Gary?
Sure. It's Gary Minahan. I'm at gary.minahan@verizon.net. That's the best way to get a hold of me.
And Sean?
Sean Fitzgerald. My email is Sean, SHAUN, .Fitzgerald@verizon.net. I'm located at 1280 Belmont Street in Brockton. And I can also be reached at fitzgeraldappraisals.com.
Well, I appreciate both of you coming on the show. We usually try to get you on to talk about the changes with appraisers in the markets every year or so. So the next time we talk, we'll be looking back, we hope, on COVID-19, and we'll be able to talk a little bit more about the results have been. But thank you very much for joining me.
Yeah,
Thank you, John.
I want to thank Gary Minahan and Sean Fitzgerald for the great job they did in describing the role of appraisers, particularly in this COVID-19 marketplace that we're currently in. I've had them before as guests, and I have to say that each time they come on, the marketplace is different. I think they first started coming on during the housing crisis of 2008 and have come on just about every year since then, and they do a great job. I'm sure for their customers, certainly do a great job filling in the viewers, of how their job fits into the role of a closing in the real estate market. In this segment of the show, we always do something lighter in nature, holidays and some of our notable county records, and one of our well-known colonial records. The holidays for the month of July: Independence Day in the 4th, World Chocolate Day in the 7th, Nelson Mandela Day on the 18th, National Ice Cream Day on the 19th, and coming up, National Hot Dog Day. If any of you saw the great story out at Coney Island in the repeat champion again for the hot dog eating contest, it was quite a show. And let's talk about a couple of our images for our Plymouth County notable land records. So we have, first of all, the Priscilla Beach Theatre. It's a theater down in the Manamet section of Plymouth. It is the oldest barn summer stock theater in America. And one of the reasons I brought this up is a lot of people notice the passing of Carl Reiner, a very famous personality, particularly in comedy, who passed away recently. He visited that location several times over his life because his son, Rob Reiner, studied there. It was a training facility used for many up-and-coming actors, including Paul Newman, Rob Reiner, Dan Blocker, Al Brooks, Monty Hall, Sandy Dennis, and other famous stars. It was the old Taylor estate that they used that barn to host theaters. And many of those people that were trained over the years made their way to TV and Broadway. And it's still a very memorable time in Plymouth and Plymouth County. Next image you're going to see is a Skim Milk Bridge. I happened to be walking in the office in Plymouth the other day, and Joan Pierce, who works as a land agent for the Mass Department of Fish and Games, was waiting for a recording. And Joan and I had worked on this record, this notable land record, a few years ago, the Skim Milk Bridge. It is a bridge made of stone on an old discontinued road that runs between Bridgewater and West Bridgewater. And it spanned the waterway, again, as a stone bridge, and the way the water churned up as it ran through that river looked like skim milk. It churned up a white coloring from the bottom of the river, hence the Skim Milk Bridge. Joan informed me that it is pending approval for the National Register of Historical Places, which is a very much an honor for any location to receive that grant. There is a parking space on Scotland Street as you pass from Bridgewater into West Bridgewater, or vice versa, and you can walk down the path and see the Skim Milk Bridge. And it is discontinued roadway by the county commissioners many years ago, but certainly very quiet place to go and visit. The time I went down there with Joan, there was a gentleman and his son fishing off the stone bridge in just a beautiful place. And last but not least, on our county records, baseball is coming back. We'll see how that goes. But that always brings back to me the most famous Red Sox of all time, Ted Williams, and his connection to Plymouth County. Ted Williams ran a baseball camp in the town of Lakeville many years ago. He's certainly one of the best hitters baseball has ever seen, the last of the 400 average baseball players, member of the Baseball Hall of Fame, and a whole number of awards, including the Triple Crown twice. He was a fighter pilot in World War II and just quite an individual. He ran this baseball camp that a lot of people attended over the years. The camp has been purchased by the town of Lakeville. It's now a recreation area and also the site of the Lakeville Senior Center. You can drive in, take a look around, and the pond behind the Senior Center, Loon Pond, was used as one of the ponds where Ted Williams would fish. Now, last but not least, we always are trying to do our colonial records these times. We're in this celebration year, 2020, the 400th anniversary of the arrival of the Plymouth colonists. There's a lot of stories that go with it. Unfortunately, with the COVID-19 hitting us at this time, a lot of those are being deferred to next year. But every month on the show, we talk about one of our notable colonial records. This one is business transactions and is a decision at the time by a Mr. John Coombe, who mortgaged one brown cow called Berry in order to be collateral for a loan. And not only was this cow mortgaged once as collateral for a loan, this cow was collateral twice. First time paid off, second time mortgaged, and money was given the second time. And when I shared that information with the Brockton Housing Partnership, one of the members, Mike Kemple from Bridgewater Savings Bank, said, would we consider that the first used cow loan? So we'll leave it at there. But I want to thank Lorna Green Baker, Christine Richards, Mike Simmons, and Emma from Brockton Cable Access helped me put this show together. It's my 117th show, sharing information to people for what is most people their most valuable asset. So I hope you have a great July, and I'll see you next month in August. Thank you very much for watching the show.